We are going to finish the final third of Sadako and the 1,000 Paper Cranes today. So we left off right where we were going to start chapter 6, named Kenji. Everyone saved paper for Sadako's good luck cranes. Chizuko brought colored paper from the bamboo class. Father saved every scrap from the barber shop. Even Nurse Yasunaga gave Sadako the wrappings from packages of medicine, and Masahiro hung every one of the birds as he had promised. Sometimes he strung many on one thread. The biggest cranes flew alone. During the next few months, there were times when Sadako felt almost well. However, Dr. Numata said it was best for her to stay in the hospital. By now, Sadako realized that she had leukemia, but she also knew that some patients recovered from the disease. She never stopped hoping that she would get well too. On good days, Sadako was busy. She did her homework, wrote letters to friends and pen pals, and amused her visitors with games, riddles, and songs. In the evening, she always made paper cranes. Her flock grew to over 300. Now the birds were perfectly folded. Her fingers were sure and worked quickly without any mistakes. Gradually, the atom bomb disease took away Sadako's energy. She learned about pain. Sometimes throbbing headaches stopped her from reading and writing. At other times, her bones seemed to be on fire, and more dizzy spells sent Sadako into deep blackness. Often she was too weak to do anything but sit by the window and look longingly out at the maple tree in the courtyard. She would stay there for hours, holding the golden crane in her lap. Sadako was feeling especially tired one day when Nurse Yasunaga wheeled her out onto the porch for some sunshine. There, Sadako saw Kenji for the first time. He was 9 and small for his age. Sadako stared at his thin face and shining dark eyes. "Hello," she said. "I'm Sadako." Kenji answered in a low, soft voice. Soon the two were talking like old friends. Kenji had been in the hospital for a long time, but he had few visitors. His parents were dead, and he had been living with an aunt in a nearby town. "She's so old that she comes to see me only once a week," Kenji said. "I read most of the time." Sadako turned away from the sad look on Kenji's face. "It doesn't really matter," he went on with a weary sigh, "because I'll die soon. I have leukemia from the bomb." "But you can't have leukemia," Sadako said. "You weren't even born then." "That isn't important," Kenji said. "The poison was in my mother's body, and I got it from her." Sadako wanted so much to comfort him, but she didn't know what to say. Then she remembered the cranes. "You can make paper cranes like I do," she said, "so that a miracle can happen." "I know about the cranes," Kenji replied quietly, "but it's too late. Even the gods can't help me now." Just then, Nurse Yasunaga came out onto the porch. "Kenji," she said sternly, "how do you know such things?" He gave her a sharp look. "I just know," he said, "and besides, I can read my blood count on the chart. Every day it gets worse." The nurse was flustered. "What a talker," she said. "You are tiring yourself." And she wheeled Kenji inside. I think it would be really hard to be in Nurse Yasunaga's position where she's caring for these children and she knows that they're terribly, terribly ill. I think that would be really hard. Back in her room, Sadako was thoughtful. She tried to imagine what it would be like to be ill and have no family. Kenji was brave, that's all. She made a big crane out of her prettiest paper and sent it across the hall to his room. Perhaps it would bring him luck. Then she folded more birds for her flock. 398, 399. One day, Kenji didn't appear on the porch. Late that night, Sadako heard the rumble of a bed being rolled down the hall. Nurse Yasunaga came in to tell her that Kenji had died. Sadako turned to the wall and let the tears come. After a while, she felt the nurse's gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let us sit by the window and talk," Nurse Yasunaga said in a kindly voice. When Sadako finally stopped sobbing, she looked out at the moonlit sky. Do you think Kenji is up there on a star island? Wherever he is, I am sure that he is happy now, the nurse said. He has shed that tired, sick body, and his spirit is free. Sadako was quiet, listening to the leaves on the maple tree rustle in the wind. Then she said, I'm going to die next, aren't I? Of course not, Nurse Yasunaga answered with a firm shake of her head. She spread some colored paper on Sadako's bed. Come and let me see you fold another paper crane before you go to sleep. After you finish 1,000 birds, you'll live to be an old, old lady. Sadako tried hard to believe that. She carefully folded cranes and made the same wish. 463, 464. Oops. Chapter 7, Hundreds of Wishes. June came with its long, endless rains. Day after day, the sky was gray as rain spattered against the windows. Rain dripped steadily from the leaves of the maple trees. Soon everything in the room smelled musty. Even the sheets felt clammy. Sadako grew pale and listless. Only her parents and Masahiro were allowed to visit her. The bamboo class sent a kokishi doll to cheer her up. Sadako liked the wooden doll's wistful smile and the red roses painted on its kimono. The doll stood next to the golden crane on Sadako's bedside table. Mrs. Sasaki was worried because Sadako didn't eat enough. One evening, she brought a surprise wrapped in a furoshiki bundle. It contained all of Sadako's favorite foods: an egg roll, chicken and rice, pickled plums, and bean cakes. That sounds legitimately so good to me right now. I'm getting hungry just reading that. Sadako propped herself up against the pillows and tried to eat. But it was no use. Her swollen gums hurt so much she couldn't chew. Finally, Sadako pushed the good things away. Her mother's eyes were bright, as if she were going to cry. Oh, I'm such a turtle! Sadako burst out. She was angry with herself for making her mother feel sad. She also knew that the Sasaki family had no extra money for expensive food. Tears stung Sadako's eyes, and she quickly brushed them away. It's all right, Mrs. Sasaki said soothingly. She cradled Sadako in her arms. You'll be better soon, maybe when the sun comes out again. Sadako leaned against her mother and listened to her read from a book of poems. When Masahiro came, Sadako was calmer and happier. He told her news from the school and ate some of the special dinner. Before Masahiro left, he said, Oh, I almost forgot! Ichi sent you a present. He dug into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of silver paper. Here, he said, giving it to his sister. Eiji said this is for another crane. Sadako sniffed the paper. It smells like candy, she said. I hope the gods like chocolate. The three burst out laughing. It was the first time Sadako had laughed in days. It was a good sign. Perhaps the golden crane's magic was beginning to work. She smoothed out the paper and folded a bird. 541. But she was too tired to make any more. Sadako stretched out on the bed and closed her eyes. As Mrs. Sasaki tiptoed out of the room, she whispered a poem she used to say when Sadako was little. O flock of heavenly cranes, cover my child with your wings. Chapter 8, Last Days. This is the last chapter. I lied. There is a chapter 9. It's very, very short, and then there is a little epilogue. Near the end of July, it was warm and sunny. Sadako seemed to be getting better. I'm over halfway to 1,000 cranes, she told Masahiro, so something good is going to happen. And it did. Her appetite came back, and much of the pain went away. Dr. Numata was pleased with the progress and told Sadako she could go home for a visit. That night, Sadako was so excited she couldn't sleep. To keep the magic working, she made more cranes. 621, 622. It was wonderful to be home with the family for Obon, the biggest holiday of the year. Obon was a special celebration for the spirits of the dead who returned to visit those they had loved on earth. And yes, this does sound somewhat similar to celebrations like Dia de los Muertos. Many cultures have some kind of celebration to remember those who have passed away. Mrs. Sasaki and Mitsui had scrubbed and swept the house until it shone. Fresh flowers brightened the table. Sadako's golden crane and kokishi dolls were there too. The air was filled with the smells of delicious holiday food. Dishes of bean cakes and rice balls had been placed on the altar shelf for ghostly visitors. That night, Sadako watched her mother put a lantern outside so that the spirits could find their way in the dark. She let out a happy sigh. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was home to stay. For several days, a steady stream of friends and relatives came to call on the Sasaki family. By the end of a week, Sadako was pale and tired again. She could only sit quietly and watch the others. Sadako certainly has good manners now, Mr. Sasaki said. Oba-chan's spirit must be pleased to see how ladylike her granddaughter has become. How can you say that? Mrs. Sasaki cried. I would rather have our lively Sadako back. She dabbed at her eyes and hurried into the kitchen. I'm making everyone sad, Sadako thought. She wished she could suddenly turn into her old self. How happy her mother would be then. And if she knew what was in Sadako's mind, her father said gruffly, as if he knew what was in her mind. There now, don't worry. After a good night's rest, you'll feel fine. But the next day, Sadako had to return to the hospital. For the first time, she was glad to be in the quiet hospital room. Her parents sat beside the bed for a long time. Every now and then, Sadako drifted off into a strange kind of half-sleep. When I die, she said dreamily, will you put my favorite bean cakes on the altar for my spirit? Mrs. Sasaki could not speak. She took her daughter's hand and held it tightly. Hush, Mr. Sasaki said in a funny voice. That will not happen for many, many years. Don't give up now, Sadako-chan. You have to make only a few hundred more cranes. Nurse Yasunaga gave Sadako medicine that helped her rest. Before her eyes closed, Sadako reached out to touch the golden crane. I will get better, she murmured to the Kokishi doll, and someday I'll race like the wind. From then on, Dr. Numata gave Sadako blood transfusions or shots almost every day. I know it hurts, he says, but we must keep on trying. Sadako nodded. She never complained about the shots and almost constant pain. A bigger pain was growing deep inside of her. It was the fear of dying. She had to fight it as well as the disease. The golden crane helped. It reminded Sadako that there was always hope. Mrs. Sasaki spent more and more time at the hospital. Every afternoon, Sadako listened for the familiar slap-slap of her plastic slippers in the hall. All visitors had to put on yellow slippers at the door, but Mrs. Sasaki's made a special sound. Sadako's heart ached to see her mother's face so lined with worry. The leaves on the maple tree were turning rust and gold when the family came for one last visit. Eiji handed Sadako a big box wrapped in gold paper and tied with a red ribbon. Slowly, Sadako opened it. Inside was something her mother had always wanted for her, a silk kimono with cherry blossoms on it. Sadako felt hot tears burn her eyes. Why did you do it? She asked, touching the soft cloth. I'll never be able to wear it, and silk costs so much money. Sadako-chan, her father said gently. Your mother stayed up late last night to finish sewing it, to try it on for her. With a great effort, Sadako lifted herself out of bed. Mrs. Sasaki helped her put on the kimono and tie the sash. Sadako was glad her swollen legs didn't show. Unsteadily, she limped across the room and sat in her chair by the window. Everyone agreed that she was like a princess in the kimono. At that moment, Shizuko came in. Dr. Numata had given her permission for a visit for a short time. She stared at Sadako in surprise. Oh, you look better in that outfit than in school clothes, she said. Everyone laughed, even Sadako. Then I'll wear it to classes every day when I'm well again, she joked. Mitsui and Eiji giggled at the idea. For a little while, it was almost like the good times they used to have at home. They played word games and sang Sadako's favorite songs. Meanwhile, she sat stiffly in the chair, trying not to show the pain it caused her, but it was worth the pain. When her parents left, they looked almost cheerful. Before she went to sleep, Sadako managed to fold only one paper crane. 644. It was the last one she'd ever made. And now this is the actual last chapter. It is very short, and then we have an epilogue. Racing with the Wind. As you can probably guess from the heavy foreshadowing and the fact that it told us in the very beginning that she doesn't survive, we kind of know what's going to happen to our beloved main character, Sadako. And here we have what happens next. Remember, the point of the story is not the sadness, but the lesson that we can learn and the lesson that she shared with people. So let's figure out at the end of the story, what are some of those lessons that we can learn from this story? Racing with the Wind. As Sadako grew weaker, she thought more about death. Would she live on a heavenly mountain? Did it hurt to die? Or was it like falling asleep? If only I could forget about it, Sadako thought. But it was like trying to stop the rain from falling. As soon as she concentrated on something else, death crept back into her mind. Toward the middle of October, Sadako lost track of days and nights. Once, when she was awake, she saw her mother crying. "Don't cry," she begged. "Please don't cry." Sadako wanted to say more, but her mouth and tongue wouldn't move. A tear slid down her cheek. She had brought her mother so much grief. And all Sadako could do now was make paper cranes and hope for a miracle. She fumbled with a piece of paper. Her fingers were too clumsy to fold it. "I can't even make a crane," she said to herself. "I've turned into a real turtle." Quickly, Sadako tried with all her strength to fold the paper before she was swept into darkness. It might have been minutes or hours later that Dr. Namada came in and felt Sadako's forehead. He gently took the paper out of her hands. She barely heard him say, "It's time to rest. You can make more birds tomorrow." Sadako gave a faint nod. Tomorrow. Tomorrow seems such a long, long way off. The next time she awoke, the family was there. And as she looks up, they're not just the paper. They look like they're actually flying. Sadako smiled at them. She was part of that warm, loving circle where she would always be. Nothing could ever change that. Already, lights were dancing behind her eyes. Sadako slid a thin, trembling hand over to touch the golden crane. Life was slipping away from her, but the crane made Sadako feel stronger inside. She looked at her flock hanging from the ceiling. As she watched, a light autumn breeze made the birds rustle and sway. They seemed to be alive and flying out through the open window. How beautiful and free they were. Sadako sighed and closed her eyes. She never woke up. And now we are to the epilogue, the story that happens after the main part of the events. Sadako Sasaki died on October 25th, 1955. Her classmates folded 356 cranes so that the 1,000 cranes were buried with Sadako. In a way, she got her wish. She will live on in the hearts of people for a long time. After the funeral, the bamboo class collected Sadako's letters and published them in a book. They called it Kokeshi, after the doll they had given to Sadako while she was in the hospital. The book was sent around Japan, and soon everyone knew about Sadako and her 1,000 paper cranes. Sadako's friends began to dream of building a monument to her and all children who were killed by the atom bomb. Young people throughout the country helped collect money for the project. Keep in mind, very, very poor, so raising any extra money would have been very difficult, let alone enough for an entire huge statue in a park. Finally, their dream came true. In 1958, the statue was unveiled in the Hiroshima Peace Park. There is Sadako, standing on top of a granite mountain of paradise. She is holding a golden crane in outstretched hands. A folded crane club was organized in her honor. Members still place thousands of paper cranes beneath Sadako's statue on August 6th, Peace Day. They make a wish too. Their wish is engraved on the base of the statue. This is our cry, this is our prayer, peace in the world. And so we have created our Peace Room art project, and I don't know exactly how many birds are up right now. We still have a few more to hang, and we have a couple very large ones flying all on their own in the corner. And then of course, as we look up, we have all of the different flowers that are helping to support all of the birds in our Peace Room art sculpture. So I don't have all 1,000 of them up quite yet, but we're very close. There's probably about 900, maybe 850 in the room at the moment. And what we're going to do next, as you can see, there's a little space here waiting for some information. We are going to be summarizing some information about the story, putting together some written descriptions of it so that whenever anyone enters our school and they see the Peace Room when they first come in the doors, they will be able to read a description so that you can share the story with any guests that come into our building. So I look forward to seeing your thoughts and your ideas on the message of the story and what kind of conclusions we can come to after learning about Sadako and the 1,000 paper cranes.